In this video, I'll be going over negotiation styles. In the upcoming week, we will be doing a negotiation simulation or game in class. And as we play the game, you'll want to pay attention to the negotiation styles that you may be using, as well as the styles that your peers are using. So when we look at the range of styles here, it's helpful to think about one's level of assertiveness and level of cooperativeness. So when we think about assertiveness, this is how much are we focusing on our needs, desired outcomes, and agenda. Whereas with cooperativeness, this is how much focus you have on others' needs and the mutual relationships that you may have with each other. So if someone is using the avoiding style, then they are unassertive and uncooperative in a negotiation. Whereas if someone is high on assertiveness but is uncooperative, they are using the competing style. If you tend to be kind of in the middle ground of both assertiveness and cooperativeness, then you're likely using compromising styles. And then if you are low on assertiveness but high on cooperation, then you are accommodating. And if you are high in both assertiveness and cooperativeness, then you are using the collaborating style. And I'll go into a bit more detail on each of the styles in terms of strategies you can use for yourself in that style or to counter others with a particular style. So looking at the competing style first, this is the traditional I win, you lose approach. Now with all of these styles, there is a time and place for it. And so when we think about competing, these are results-oriented, confident, assertive folks that are primarily focused on the bottom line or their own needs. They can, in the extreme, become aggressive and domineering. Not always, but sometimes. So keep an eye out for that. When it makes sense to use is when quick decisions need to be made. Perhaps there's an emergency looming or moral issues are at stake. There may be unpopular actions to be implemented. It can also make sense when one party is playing hardball and you want to stop them from taking advantage of a non-competitive person. Competing also makes sense when the issue is trivial and the other side does not care so much about the outcome or goal, and you want that quick win. Or perhaps the issues are simple and the resolutions are clear. And so the dangers of using this style is that it can lead to deadlock or an impasse. And if this is a style you use all the time, it becomes predictable. And so when we combine styles like high competition and someone with high avoidance, this can be harmful to relationships. Now, to counter this, if you're noticing someone else is using competing, don't cave in. Restate your position firmly using strong language and never reward bullies. So say we require or we need, as opposed to saying softer language like, we'd want, we hope. On the other end is the accommodating style. And so this is the I lose, you win approach. And this often comes up when you're trying to maintain relationships with the other party. But really the most important concern is making the other party happy. And so when accommodating styles make sense is when diplomacy is needed in complex negotiations. It is also appropriate when there's a lot of time available and you're not in a rush. And if the two parties of equal power are committed to mutually beneficial goals. Now, again, the main thing here is that issues and relationships are both important and valued. Now, the danger behind this style is that it is almost always bad to be accommodating towards someone that is competitive because they'll see you as weak and take advantage of you. It can also signal to the other side that you've got lots to give up and they will expect more. Some self-defense techniques. Be careful of the Greek gift because sometimes the other side might be offering you something that's not of value to them or something small in order to get you to oblige to give something back of greater value in return. That's actually how Costco works with giving away samples. That's creating that reciprocation that feel that I just took this sample. I now feel like I have to buy something. When you are receiving something, be careful not to give back something of disproportionately higher value in return. So you want to offer something of equal value or similar value and not give up too much. Be careful they are not incompetent because if they do make big concessions and they don't realize it, it can hurt their organization or get vetoed. So just be aware of that if the other side is too accommodating. The avoiding style is a lose-lose situation. This is passive in that the individual wants to avoid conflict and may withdraw or step back from the situation. Now, there is a time and place to use it though. It can be used when the issue is minor, and rather you want to focus on other important urgent issues, especially if time is short. Perhaps you have little power and believe that there's no chance that what you want or need is going to be met. So you avoid the other party and block their ability to get anything out of you. It may make sense when there is potential danger of confrontation that exceeds the benefits of addressing the issue, as in it could be more harmful to confront it than to avoid it. And perhaps you just need a break. You need to gather more information to make better decisions. Again, this is when you have the extra time to do this. And so that avoiding can be strategic to gather more info. Now, the danger behind using this style is that sometimes avoiding conflict can create more conflict because you're avoiding the situation. And this is where resentment can rise, assumptions are being made, emotions get dragged out. And then finally, when you do address the issue, it can be more difficult because it's been lingering and harboring negative feelings during this time. So the self-defense to this style is setting clear expectations of timing milestones with dates, right? So that it doesn't get just dragged out, but there's a deadline to when things are supposed to happen. And consider when escalating the issue that you'll want to understand the other side's decision-making process and levels of responsibility. So for instance, if one or both sides doesn't have the authority to make a particular decision, you'll want to escalate the issue to those that can with the appropriate authority levels. You don't want to promise something that you actually can't deliver on, and vice versa. The compromising style is both parties win some and lose some. So this is where we're finding the middle ground or splitting the difference. And there's trade-offs of give and take. And both sides are somewhat satisfied in their needs. So think haggling. Now, in the absence of good rationale or properly exchanged concessions, halfway may be what seems is fair. However, what this style ignores is that when a party takes a very extreme position, they're going to get more out of it compared to the other party that may take a more moderate position, because that middle ground is skewed to one side. Now, when we want to use compromising is when cooperation is important, but time and resources are short. So there's not enough time to get more creative and collaborative. It makes sense when some solution is better than none. So you don't want to come back empty-handed. And then when there's nothing else left to offer and you feel like it's the only way to seal the deal. Now, the danger behind this is the tendency to not be prepared because you're winging it. If you're making concessions with no strong rationale or reasoning, the other party assumes you're going to keep making concessions. And when they know this, they're going to take a more extreme position. If our main strategy is to find that middle ground, you're likely not going to think about all of the other ways you can address the negotiation. And so you're ignoring potential solution. So the self-defense tips, only retreat within your position if you have good reasoning and when you're rewarded in another way. So think about trading across goals and interests and not positions. So don't make splitting differences your first strategy. Try exploring other alternatives first. And if the other side starts with an extreme opening position, you'll want to bring them back to reality or counter with your own extreme position to balance things. For the collaborating style, think win-win. This uses open and honest communication and finding creative solutions that satisfy both parties. This is when both parties are open to new and novel ideas and suggest many alternatives for consideration. A common phrase with collaborating is, how do we expand the pie? So rather than cutting the small pie up into pieces, if we can make the pie bigger, everyone's pie slice gets bigger too. And this makes sense when diplomacy is required in complex negotiations, but the key thing here is that you have lots of time to collaborate. Collaborating makes sense when both parties have similar or equal power and are committed to achieving mutually beneficial goals. And again, issues and relationships are both important and valued. As for the dangers, you want to be careful not to collaborate with competitive negotiators unless they agree and live up to your agreed rules of collaboration. Because when you are using a collaborative approach, you are being open and honest. And if the other side is using a competitive approach, they may use that information that you shared against you. That's where oversharing can result in being exploited. So you really need to understand the other side's style. And note that this style does require more time and the right level of effort. Otherwise, it might not work out at all. Now, the self-defense here is if it's not in your interest to be collaborative, pick another style. Your time is limited, and so you want to be careful who you collaborate with. You can't be using the collaborating style with everyone all the time because it would just be exhausting. So of these styles, you likely lean towards some more than others. You probably use all 5, just depending on the context or situation, whether it's negotiating in your personal life or negotiating at work. And it also depends on if it's a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship. And again, in this class, a lot of these concepts you've already lived, experienced yourself, and it's putting language to it so that we can be aware and intentional about which styles we want to use and which styles we want to counter and how we may want to develop and improve our negotiation styles. So if you have any questions, just let me know.